For 400 years, humanity was not feared. It was tolerated. The Galactic Concordance had many names for Earth's people. Loud, emotional, violent, impatient, young, unstable, primitive. In the shining council chambers of Velora Station, where 12 ancient civilizations decided the fate of thousands of worlds, human ambassadors were given seats near the lower ring, far from the central light. They were allowed to speak, but rarely answered. They were allowed to trade, but rarely trusted. They were allowed to send fleets through concordance lanes, but never lead them. To the galaxy, humanity was useful in the way a hammer was useful. Crude, heavy, effective only when something needed to be broken. Human ships were ugly compared to alien vessels. They had thick armor instead of elegant shield skins. They carried rail cannons, missile racks, nuclear mines, dumbfire torpedoes, chemical thrusters, backup engines, manual targeting scopes, sealed bulkheads, and old-fashioned crew stations that could operate even when every central computer aboard was dead. Alien admirals laughed at them. They called human vessels iron coffins with engines. But Admiral Mara Voss never laughed with them. She stood inside the Concordance chamber wearing a plain black uniform with no jewels, no ceremonial armor, and no glowing rank crown. Her short dark hair carried streaks of silver near the temples. A pale scar crossed her left cheek from temple to jaw, the kind of scar advanced medicine could have erased easily if she had wanted it gone. She had kept it. Not for beauty. For memory. When Mara spoke, her voice was quiet enough that the translators had to sharpen it. The silent meridian must remain sealed, she said. Above the council floor, the great star map shimmered into view. Thousands of systems glowed in blue and gold. Trade routes curved between them like rivers of light. Military borders pulsed in red. But beyond the outer rim, past the last stable routes, there was a wide black region where the map showed almost nothing. Human charts marked it with warning symbols. Alien charts marked it as empty space. Unclaimed. Unexplored. Strategically useless. Humans called it the Forbidden Dark. Matriarch Saraline, leader of the Concordance Council, watched Mara from the central dais. Saraline was tall, pale, and graceful, with 4 silver eyes and a voice trained by centuries of politics. She did not hate humanity. That made her more dangerous. Hatred could be challenged. Disdain smiled while it ignored you. Admiral Voss, Saraline said, your species has repeated this warning for generations. Yet you still refuse to provide clear evidence. Mara looked at the black region on the map. Because the evidence is inside it. Several councillors shifted. One of them laughed under his breath. Saraline's expression remained calm. You asked the Concordance to recognize an entire region of space as forbidden based on human fear. Not fear, Mara replied. Memory. A Val Dominion marshal leaned forward, his golden armor glowing softly around his long silver frame. Memory of what? Mara did not look at him. Of the last time someone opened it. For a moment, the chamber became still. Then the stillness broke. A few councillors whispered. Others looked annoyed. The Oryx warlord Korak Thuan clicked his mandibles and turned away as if the human warning had wasted valuable oxygen. The vile marshal smiled with the patient cruelty of someone listening to a child explain a nightmare. Matriarch Saraline lifted one elegant hand. The Concordance respects humanity's cultural trauma, she said. But we cannot limit military, trade, and research movement across an entire outer sector because of undocumented human legends. Mara's eyes hardened. They are not legends. Then give us proof. Mara looked directly at Saraline. If I give you proof, it means someone has crossed the line again. And if that happens, your proof will come too late. The chamber did not laugh this time. But it still did not listen. The warning was archived again. Classified as historical paranoia. Human strategic superstition. Frontier mythology. Another strange habit from a species that built bunkers under cities, emergency engines inside ships, manual controls behind digital panels, and weapons that still worked after every elegant system had failed. That was how the galaxy treated humanity's greatest warning. Until the stars began to die. It started on the outer rim, where few important worlds paid attention. 3 mining systems stopped transmitting in the same hour. No distress call. No escape pods. No radiation burst. No wreckage. Just silence. Then 6 more systems went dark. Then a military relay. Then an entire trade corridor vanished from communication as if the universe itself had swallowed it. The Concordance sent scouts. None returned. Then the enemy arrived at Illyrian Prime. They came without warning, without demands, without language. Their ships emerged from the void like broken moons wrapped in black metal, moving without heat signatures, without engine trails, without any detectable command signal. They did not form battle lines. They did not answer hails. They simply drifted forward like a sickness. Illyrian Prime was protected by the most advanced defense lattice in the known galaxy. Its shields had survived solar storms, antimatter impacts, and 3 civil wars. When the enemy ships entered range, the lattice fired with perfect precision. The beams struck. The enemy absorbed them. Then returned the energy tenfold. Illyrian Prime burned for 6 days. After that, the Concordance gave the enemy a name. The Karveth. The name meant nothing. It was only something to fear. Within months, the galaxy entered its first true war in 3,000 years. Ancient empires deployed weapons too beautiful for human eyes to trust. Crystal dreadnoughts bent gravity around enemy formations. Harmonic cannons shattered matter through soundless vibration. Quantum lances cut across impossible distances. Living war cores predicted battles before they began. And the Karveth learned them all. Every advanced system used against them became part of them. Every linked fleet network became a path for corruption. Every adaptive shield became food. The galaxy's greatest strength was its perfection. The Karveth turned perfection into weakness. Humanity offered help in the 7th month of the war. Admiral Mara Voss returned to the council chamber and stood beneath the same cold lights. "Stop using linked weapons," she said. "Stop using adaptive systems. Stop letting your ships think for you." The vile marshal sneered. "And what do humans recommend? Bullets?" Mara answered without shame. "Yes." Laughter rolled through the chamber. Matriarch Saraline did not laugh, but she did not listen either. "You believe primitive warfare can defeat an enemy that has humbled the greatest minds in the galaxy?" Mara's eyes became colder. "No," she said. "I believe primitive things survive when great minds become predictable." The council dismissed her. 2 years later, they would remember that sentence like a prophecy. The war did not become a disaster all at once. It became one victory report at a time. In the first months, every empire claimed success. The vile Dominion destroyed 7 Karveth vessels near the Oran Belt. The Seraphine Choir trapped an enemy cluster inside a harmonic kill zone and broadcast the footage across the Concordance as proof that courage and technology still ruled the stars. The Oryx hegemony crushed 3 black ships between artificial gravity wells and declared that the enemy was strange, but not unbeatable. For a short time, the galaxy believed itself. Then the Karveth changed. The next vile beam strike did not burn through enemy armor. It reflected back through the same firing array and split the Varel flagship from bow to engine. The next Seraphine harmonic field did not shatter the Karveth. It reversed, folded through the choir zone formation, and cracked their crystal ships like glass under pressure. The next Oryx gravity weapon did not crush the enemy. It crushed the Oryx fleet beside it. The Concordance finally understood the pattern. The Karveth were not simply surviving advanced technology. They were learning it. Every elegant weapon taught them a new language. Every adaptive shield gave them a new door. Every linked fleet network gave them a nervous system to bite into. The more perfect the machine, the faster the Karveth found its weakness. By the 3rd year, commanders no longer trusted their own systems. Admirals began ordering ships to disconnect from central war mines. Navigation cores were isolated. Targeting networks were limited. Artificial battle predictions were banned in several fleets. But the damage had already been done. The Concordance had spent thousands of years building ships that were smarter than their crews. Their officers knew how to approve a firing solution, not calculate one by hand. Their pilots knew how to guide a vessel through assisted lanes, not read dead space by instinct. Their gunners knew how to manage energy flow, not aim a weapon without a predictive overlay. When the machines failed, the crews failed with them. Human crews did not. That was the first thing the galaxy noticed. A human destroyer could lose half its sensor grid and still keep firing. A human cruiser could vent atmosphere from 3 decks, seal the breach manually, reroute power through emergency copper lines, and continue fighting with half its bridge dark. A human frigate could lose its central computer and still navigate by backup scopes, beacon flashes, and crew math scratched onto plastic boards. Alien analysts called it inefficient. Human captains called it training. The Battle of Grey Lantern became the first major example. A refugee convoy of nearly 2 million civilians was trying to escape through a narrow outer rim route when 17 Carveth ships emerged behind them. The nearest Concordance fleet was too far away. The convoy had no chance. Only 6 human frigates stood between the refugees and the black ships. 6 against 17. The Concordance command network marked the convoy as lost. Captain Elias Rook, commander of the HSS Iron Psalms escort wing at the time, ignored that prediction. His frigates went dark. They cut every external network, killed automated coordination, and spread mines manually along the route. They fired old tungsten rounds and fusion missiles with preset timers. Their targeting was ugly. Their formations were uneven. Their signals were short, crude, and almost impossible for the Carveth to use. The first Carveth ship died to a mine it never detected. The second was split open by a railgun shot from a frigate running with no active sensor broadcast. The third rammed through debris and struck a nuclear charge planted inside the wreckage of a human fuel tender. For 9 hours, 6 human frigates held the route. One by one, they died. But they died slowly. And every minute they bought moved the refugee convoy farther from slaughter. When the last frigate finally broke apart, its final gun continued firing because one human crewman had locked the trigger mechanism by hand before decompression took him. The refugees survived. The Concordance issued a minor commendation. Humanity received no command authority. On Velora Station, matriarch Saraline watched the battle footage alone. She expected crude courage. She expected desperation. She expected violence. All species had those things when death came close enough. What unsettled her was the calm. Human crews did not behave as if disaster was unexpected. They did not freeze when systems failed. They did not stare helplessly when their beautiful tools went silent. They cursed, bled, sealed doors, dragged wounded crew aside, and kept working. As if they had always known the universe would eventually become cruel enough to require hands, teeth, and stubbornness. Still, the Council did not change. Human ships remained auxiliary forces. They were assigned to evacuation lanes, rigard actions, mine clearance, and sacrifice positions. They were praised when they died usefully, then ignored when they asked to help plan the war. Admiral Mara Voss objected again. "You are using humans as sandbags," she told the Council. High Marshal Varen Sill answered with cold amusement. "Sandbags are useful in floods." Mara stared at him. "Only if the people stacking them understand water." No one responded. Then came Grand Admiral Thalos Vea. Thalos commanded the largest remaining Concordance fleet, 31,000 vessels drawn from 8 civilizations. He was brilliant, decorated, proud, and increasingly desperate. The Carveth had pushed his force backward across 6 systems, breaking every defensive line he created. Behind him were burning colonies. Ahead of him was an unguarded corridor near the outer maps. His navigation priest warned him first. "That route bends toward the silent meridian." Thalos stood before the tactical display, eyes fixed on the black tide behind them. "Is the corridor stable?" "Yes, Admiral. But human charts mark the region beyond it as forbidden." Thalos's mouth tightened. "Human charts also mark bullets as modern warfare." "Sir, Admiral Voss has repeated that no fleet should cross." "Admiral Voss is not in command of this fleet." The priest lowered his head. For one moment, Thalos hesitated. Not because he respected the human warning. Because fear had finally made every option look like a trap. Then another defense line collapsed behind them. 12 Varel cruisers vanished from the display. The Carveth formation surged closer. Phalos made his choice. Open the corridor. The navigation priest looked up sharply. Sir. That is an order. Across the fleet, engines turned toward the dark. 31,000 ships moved for the silent meridian. At first, nothing happened. The first wave crossed the boundary. Then the second. Then the third. Alien crews felt relief spread across their decks. The route was open. The Karveth were behind them. The forbidden region ahead looked empty, quiet, harmless. Then the Karveth followed. The moment the first black enemy vessel crossed the meridian, hidden alarms woke across human space. Deep beneath Luna, a sealed military chamber opened for the first time in 200 years. Old consoles flickered alive on isolated power. Red lights spread across walls marked with warnings no alien had ever seen. A single message appeared on the central screen. Meridian breach confirmed. In orbit around Neptune, 12 objects disguised as dead mining platforms rotated toward deep space. Their false hulls cracked open, revealing weapons larger than cities. On Mars, buried silos unlocked beneath red dust. On Europa, hidden dry docks came alive under frozen oceans. And on Earth, Admiral Mara Voss was reading casualty reports when her wrist console rang with a sound every human officer feared but every human officer had trained for. She looked at the signal. For the first time, her face showed something close to fear. Not panic. Recognition. She answered. A voice spoke from the other end. They crossed in. Mara closed her eyes. Then she stood. Activate Meridian Command, she said. Wake the Black Bastions. Recall every ship with manual fire capability. Her aide swallowed. And the Concordance? Mara looked toward the window, where Earth turned quietly beneath the clouds. They wanted proof, she said. Now they are inside it. Grand Admiral Phalos Vea realized something was wrong when the stars disappeared. Not all at once. That would have been easier to understand. Instead, the stars faded slowly, one by one, as if the universe were being covered from the outside by a patient hand. First, the distant navigation markers dimmed. Then the outer beacon chains vanished. Then the blue-white star clusters behind the fleet became dull, blurred, and finally black. The fleet slowed. 31,000 Concordance ships drifted beyond the silent meridian, surrounded by a darkness that did not behave like empty space. Phalos stood on the command bridge of the flagship Aurelian Crown, trying to keep his breathing steady. Around him, officers worked in silence, their faces lit by failing displays. The ship's navigation core pulsed weakly at the center of the bridge, its liquid light surface flickering with corrupted star maps. Status, Phalos ordered. His chief navigator swallowed before answering. Long-range sensors are returning inconsistent data. Inconsistent how? The navigator looked down. Distance markers are changing when we look at them. Phalos turned slowly. Explain. A beacon reads 12 light minutes away. Then 4. Then 60. Then it disappears. The computer cannot hold a fixed position. Manual astronomy. The navigator hesitated. There are no visible stars to calculate from. Phalos felt the first true crack of fear inside his chest. Behind them, the Karveth fleet crossed the meridian in perfect silence. The black enemy ships did not attack immediately. That was worse. They moved past the outer boundary and spread into a crescent formation, facing deeper into the dark as if they had reached holy ground. A junior officer whispered, "Why are they stopping?" No one answered. Then the first Concordance ship vanished. It was a Varel carrier, 14 kilometers long, protected by layered shields and thousands of crew. One moment it was visible on the tactical display. The next, its symbol blinked out. No explosion. No distress call. No debris. Just absence. Phalos leaned forward. Sensor error. Another ship vanished. Then 3 more. Then 9. The formation began to break apart. Captains demanded orders through unstable channels. Some ships tried to reverse course, but their engines fired in the wrong direction. Others accelerated forward without command. A Seraphine vessel opened fire at something only its crew could see and cut through 2 Allied escorts before anyone could stop it. Lock formation. Phalos shouted. Formation link is corrupted. Then isolate every ship. We are trying. Try harder. The bridge lights flickered. A sound came through the speakers. At first, it was only static. Then breathing. Slow. Wet. Close. Phalos looked toward the communication officer. Cut that audio. She obeyed. The breathing continued. Then it became voices. Hundreds of them. Thousands. Some spoke in vial. Some in oryx battle clicks. Some in seraphine harmonic tones. Some in human languages no concordance officer should have had stored in their translation banks. A vial weapons officer began to tremble. That is my brother, he whispered. Phalos turned on him. Your brother is dead. The officer's face went pale. I know. The voice from the speakers laughed with his brother's mouth. Across the fleet, the Forbidden Dark began to speak to every crew in a voice they could not ignore. Dead parents. Lost children. Old lovers. Forgotten commanders. Their own voices begging from somewhere outside the hull. Then Phalos heard Admiral Mara Voss. You were warned. His blood went cold. He slammed his fist against the command rail. Shut it down. The communication officer was crying now. It is not coming through the system. Then where is it coming from? She looked up slowly. Inside the ship. Outside, the Karveth ships bowed. That was the only word Phalos's mind could use. Their broken moon hulls tilted toward the deeper black. Their weapons powered down. Their formations opened like worshippers making room for a king. Then something moved beyond them. The tactical display failed to show it properly. Every sensor gave a different answer. Some measured it as a moon-sized object. Others as a gravity wound. Others as empty space. But through the main viewport, Phalos saw enough. A shape existed in the dark where no shape should exist. It was larger than a planet, yet incomplete, as if made from missing light. Its edges shifted like smoke underwater. Around it floated the remains of ships from civilizations that did not exist in any concordance archive. And among those ancient wrecks were human hulls. Old human hulls. Very old. Phalos stared at them, unable to speak. His navigation priest stepped closer to the display, face drained of color. Admiral, he whispered, those ships are older than humanity's official first contact. That is impossible. Yes, sir. The shape in the dark opened. Not like a mouth. Like a memory. Every screen aboard the Aurelian Crown flashed white. Then the bridge was gone. For one terrible second, Phalos stood on a dead world beneath a red sky. Oceans boiled at the horizon. Cities burned without flame. Something enormous moved behind the clouds, and every living thing on the planet screamed without making sound. Then he was back on the bridge, gasping. Other officers had fallen to the floor. Some were praying. Some were bleeding from their noses. One had clawed at his own eyes before two guards dragged his hands away. The Forbidden Dark did not attack first with weapons. It attacked with meaning. It made minds understand how small they were. The Karveth began moving again, but not toward the Concordance fleet. Toward the dark shape. Toward the thing they had followed the war to awaken. They were not invaders. They were servants returning to a throne. Phalos finally understood what humanity had been trying to say for 400 years. The silent meridian was not a border. It was not a superstition. It was not a primitive warning painted across empty stars by a frightened species. It was a prison line. And he had led 31,000 ships across it. Open a channel to Velora Station, he said, voice barely working. The officer stared at him. Admiral, our signals are looping. Use every emergency burst. Every reserve transmitter. Burn the core if you must. After several seconds, a weak transmission path opened. The image broke, returned, fractured, and broke again. On Velora Station, Matriarch Seraline appeared in the council chamber, surrounded by leaders who had mocked every human warning. Phalos leaned toward the transmitter. Matriarch, he said, the humans were right. The council chamber went still. Seraline's expression changed, but only slightly. What is inside the Forbidden Dark? Thalos looked past the screen. Something outside the viewport was moving closer. His voice dropped to a whisper. It is not empty. Behind him, the lights died one by one. The final thing Caroline saw was Thalos turning toward the dark with the face of a man who had finally seen the truth too late. Then the transmission ended. For several seconds, no one in the council chamber spoke. Then every alarm on Velora station activated. A human priority signal cut through all concordance channels without permission. It overrode encryption, rank, species protocol, and diplomatic firewall. The symbol that appeared was not the flag of Earth. It was a black circle crossed by a red line. Under it were 3 words. Meridian Command Active. Admiral Mara Voss appeared on the central display. She did not bow. She did not request permission. Her eyes moved across the council, then stopped on Caroline. You crossed the line, Mara said. Caroline's voice was quieter than anyone had ever heard it. Admiral Voss, what is inside the Forbidden Dark? Mara answered like a woman naming an old wound. The reason humans built war before we built trust. The Concordance learned the truth in fragments, because the full truth was too large to accept at once. Admiral Mara Voss did not give them legends. She gave them records. The first file appeared in the center of the council chamber without ceremony. The image was old, grainy, and scarred by radiation damage. It showed a human exploration vessel drifting at the edge of black space, its hull torn open, its lights flickering like dying stars. The date stamp was impossible. 387 years before humanity's official first contact with the Concordance. Matriarch Caroline stared at the image, her 4 silver eyes narrowing. That cannot be real, one counselor whispered. Mara did not look at him. It is real. The recording continued. A young human captain appeared on the screen, strapped into a damaged command chair. Blood floated in red drops around his face. Behind him, alarms flashed in a language the translators struggled to process because the dialect was so old. This is Captain Jonah Reyes of the expedition ship St. Carina, the man said. His voice shook, but he did not break. We crossed the outer dark thinking it was empty. It is not empty. It is sealed. The chamber remained silent. The captain looked away as something struck his ship from the outside. We found wrecks, he continued. Thousands of them. Maybe millions. Civilizations we have no records for. Ships older than our star charts. Some were still transmitting. His breathing became uneven. They were asking for help in our voices. A few alien counselors shifted with visible discomfort. Mara paused the recording. That was humanity's first warning, she said. We did not understand it. So we did what young species do. Caroline looked at her. You went back. Mara nodded. We went back. The next record showed a second human vessel, larger and armed. It returned from the Forbidden Dark with half its crew dead and the survivors locked behind quarantine glass. Some screamed. Some laughed. Some spoke in voices that were not their own. One crewman sat completely still, repeating the same sentence for 19 hours. It knows our machines are doors. The council watched without speaking. Mara opened the third file. This one showed war. Old human ships moving through absolute blackness. No elegant energy shields. No living fleet cores. No linked navigation mines. Just metal hulls, nuclear mines, rail cannons, chemical thrusters, and terrified crews operating by hand while something vast whispered through every speaker. The enemy was not called the Hollow King then. Not yet. The early human records named it only as Signal Zero. A pattern that infected thought. A presence that moved through advanced systems. A hunger that did not need flesh if it could reach memory, fear, or code. It does not conquer like an empire, Mara said. It enters. Through communication. Through automation. Through dreams. Through machines sophisticated enough to listen back. High Marshal Varen Sil, the same virile commander who had once mocked human weapons, looked pale beneath his silver skin. The Karveth are connected to it. They are its servants, Mara said. Or its leftovers. We still do not know which. An Oryx counselor growled, trying to recover some authority. If this thing is so dangerous, why has humanity not destroyed it? Mara turned toward him. Because we are primitive. No one laughed. She let the words sit in the chamber like a blade. Then she continued. We could not destroy it. But we learned how to deny it easy food. The map changed. The black region of the Forbidden Dark appeared again, but now it was surrounded by hidden human markers. Fortresses. Minefields. Dead zones. Listening posts. Gravity anchors. Signal-killing arrays. Secret shipyards. Weapons platforms disguised as frozen moons, wreckage, mining stations, and abandoned survey buoys. The council stared. The silent meridian was not one line. It was a wall. A wall humanity had built in secret for centuries. Ceraline's voice was barely above a whisper. You militarized an entire border of space without informing the concordance. Mara's eyes sharpened. We informed you every year for 400 years. You filed it under superstition. The words struck hard because they were clean, factual, and impossible to deny. Another recording opened. A dying human officer floated in a shattered corridor, one hand pressed against a wound in his stomach. Behind him, through a cracked viewport, the Forbidden Dark pulsed like something breathing. If anyone finds this, he said, voice fading, seal the lane. Burn the maps. Kill every open signal. Forget our names if you have to. Just don't let it out. The recording ended. For once, the concordance chamber did not feel ancient or powerful. It felt small. Matriarch Ceraline lowered her head. How many humans died keeping this secret? Mara's answer came without drama. Enough that we stopped counting by name. Ceraline looked up. And still you kept guarding it. Mara's expression did not soften. Yes. Even after we mocked you. Yes. Why? Mara looked at the black region on the map. Because the thing behind that line does not care who respected us. No one answered. Across human space, the hidden war machine was waking fully. Old ships left dark docks beneath Europa's ice. Mars opened silos buried under red dust. Neptune's false mining platforms unfolded into black gun fortresses. Human crews moved with calm urgency, sealing helmets, loading kinetic rounds, and disconnecting every unnecessary smart system. Captain Elias Rook stood on the bridge of the HSS Iron Sam, a dreadnought officially listed as dismantled 120 years ago. Its hull was black, scarred, and thick enough to survive weapons most alien ships were designed to dodge. Its main gun was not beautiful. It was a spinal rail cannon the length of a city, built to throw a solid metal slug with enough force to break a moon's spine. Lieutenant Cale Mercer, the youngest officer on the bridge, stared at the old manual stations. One gunner unfolded an optical sight from a steel case. Cale blinked. Does that actually work? Captain Rook looked at him. When everything else dies, he said, that will still work. Then Admiral Mara Voss's voice came across every human meridian channel. All units, this is Voss. The Concordance fleet is trapped beyond the line. The Karveth have reached the outer seal. The Hollow King is awake. No one spoke. Every human aboard every ship understood what that meant. Mara continued. We hold the dark here, or we fight it over Earth. Across the system, the Black Bastions turned their guns toward the Forbidden Dark. And humanity went to war with the thing it had spent centuries holding back. The human fleet crossed the silent meridian without ceremony. No anthem played. No heroic broadcast filled the channels. No admiral gave a speech about glory. Human ships simply moved forward, one by one, into the region every generation before them had been taught to fear. To the Concordance observers, that silence was more disturbing than any battle cry. They had expected rage. They had expected panic. They had expected some primitive hunger for revenge, some emotional human need to prove themselves after centuries of insult. Instead, humanity looked prepared. On every human vessel, crews followed old procedures written before most alien nations had accepted Earth as civilized. Smart systems were shut down. Adaptive targeting was disabled. Central fleet links were severed. Weapons were switched to local control. Helmets were sealed. Backup oxygen was checked by hand. Emergency bulkheads were locked manually. Every ship became smaller, dumber, harder to infect. Inside Bastion 1, Admiral Mara Voss stood over a flat tactical board while officers moved physical markers across it. There were screens in the command room, but no holographic war spirits, no predictive battle mines, no beautiful rotating simulations. The Concordance had expected the secret heart of humanity's defense to look terrifyingly advanced. It looked old. Paper maps sat under glass. Signal officers wore headsets connected by hardened cables. Runners carried printed orders between stations when burst relays became unreliable. A huge mechanical clock counted down beside the main wall. Matriarch Saraline watched through a secure visual feed from Velora Station. For the first time in her long life, she was not sure if she was looking at weakness or wisdom. Admiral Voss, Saraline said, Grand Admiral Thalos's fleet still contains more than 20 million personnel. Mara did not look away from the board. I know. Can you save them? No. The answer came so quickly that Saraline went still. Mara finally turned toward the screen. I can save some, she said. I can stop the rest from becoming doors. Saraline understood enough now for the words to hurt. Beyond the meridian, the trapped Concordance fleet had become a graveyard that still begged for rescue. Thousands of alien ships drifted in the darkness, many without power, many broken open, many wrapped in black growth that looked like metal roots. Some transmitted distress calls. Some transmitted songs. Some transmitted the voices of children. Captain Elias Rook heard those voices as the HSS Iron Sam advanced through the dead zone. Help us. Please. We are still alive. My mother is on this ship. The bridge crew listened in silence. Lieutenant Cale Mercer stared at the communication panel, his young face pale under the emergency lights. Captain, he said carefully, some of those signals may be real. Rook did not turn from the forward display. Yes. Cale swallowed. We're ignoring them. We're surviving them. The answer was brutal. It was also correct. A human rescue frigate moved toward one damaged Varel ship that still showed faint life signs. It did not dock. It launched a dumbline drone attached to a physical cable. No wireless connection. No adaptive scan. No remote mind. Just camera, hook, and explosive bolts. The drone reached the vial hull. For 3 seconds, the feed showed survivors pressed against a viewport. Then every face turned toward the camera at the same time. All of them smiled. The rescue frigate cut the cable and detonated the drone. Cale looked away. Rook's voice was low. That is why we do not answer every cry. Ahead of the human formation, the Karveth were no longer hiding their purpose. Their ships moved between the trapped Concordance vessels, dragging broken hulls into a vast circular structure. Black filaments linked reactors, navigation cores, shield generators, and living command systems into one corrupted ring. It was not a station. It was not a normal weapon. It was a gate. At Bastion 1, Mara saw the structure form on the tactical board. How long before completion? She asked. Her chief tactical officer checked 3 separate manual estimates. 32 minutes. Mara's eyes narrowed. Then we break it in 31. The first human attack was ugly. That was why it worked. Rail slugs tore through the dark with no guidance signals to corrupt. Nuclear mines detonated on mechanical timers. Dumb missiles flew in preset patterns that even human computers did not control after launch. Human ships fired, drifted, vented heat, changed direction manually, and fired again. There was no perfect rhythm. No elegant formation. No central intelligence for the Hollow King to bite. The Karveth reacted slowly, almost confused. Their black ships turned toward one attack pattern only to be struck by another that had no connection to it. They absorbed energy weapons easily, but human metal did not feed them. It hit. It broke. It tore. For the first time in years, the Karveth bled. On Velora Station, the Concordance Council watched crude human fire rip apart ships their finest weapons had barely scratched. High Marshal Varen Sil whispered, "Impossible." Saraline did not take her eyes from the screen. "No," she said. "Prepared." But the forbidden dark did not remain silent. The Hollow King noticed humanity. On the Iron Psalm, lights flickered. Temperature dropped. Static crawled across dead speakers that should not have been connected to anything. Then the voices began. Lieutenant Cale Mercer heard his sister. She had died 6 years earlier in an orbital shuttle failure. "Cale," she whispered from the emergency speaker, "open the channel. I'm outside." His hand moved before he realized it. Captain Rook caught his wrist. Cale looked at him, eyes wet. "She sounds real." Rook held his stare. "The dark wears what hurts. That is all." "She said my name. It knows where to cut." The voice became softer. "Cale, please. It's cold." Cale's fingers trembled. Rook drew his sidearm and shot the speaker. The bridge fell silent except for alarms. "Manual comms only," Rook ordered. No one questioned him. Then the forward viewport turned black. Not dark. Black. As if every light outside the ship had been swallowed by a single thought. Across human ships, across dying alien hulls, across Velora Station itself, the Hollow King spoke. Not through language. Through memory. Every listener heard a different voice. A mother. A child. A lover. A commander. A version of themselves from a future where surrender felt peaceful. Admiral Mara Voss heard her first captain, dead for 30 years. "Mara," the voice said gently, "you are tired." The command room froze. The voice continued. "You guarded the door for those who mocked you. You buried your own so the proud could sleep. Open the way. Let the burden end." Mara's hands tightened on the command rail. Then she gave one order. "Make noise." Across the human fleet, static blasted through internal systems. Metal alarms rang. Engines roared. Old percussion signals hammered through hulls. The Hollow King did not sound like a monster over the whispers. That was what made it worse. The Hollow King's voice roared. A monster would have been easier to fight. A monster had shape, hunger, something vast began to open. A monster could be named, tracked, understood the surrounded, burned, they were out of time, shot, or broken. But the thing inside the Forbidden Dark did not enter the battlefield like an enemy commander. It entered like memory. On the bridge of the HSS Iron Psalm, Lieutenant Cale Mercer heard his sister again, even though Captain Rook had destroyed the speaker. This time her voice came from the walls. From the floor. From the vibration of the ship's wounded hull. "Cale," she whispered, "why did you leave me?" His breath caught. He knew it was not real. He knew the training. He knew the old Meridian rule, the dark wears what hurts. But knowing something was false did not stop it from sounding true. Around him, other crew members fought their own ghosts. One engineer heard his dead wife singing a nursery song. A weapons officer heard his father calling him a coward. The old gunner at the optical site closed one eye and kept muttering numbers under his breath, refusing to listen to anything except range and angle. Captain Elias Rook stood at the center of the bridge with blood on his collar and one hand gripping the command rail. "Keep working," he said. No one answered. "Keep working," he repeated louder. That time, hands moved again. Switches clicked. Manual wheels turned. Damage reports came in through shouting voices instead of screens. The ship was burning in 6 places. Decks 12 through 14 had lost pressure. 3 portside batteries were gone. The outer armor was crawling with black frost that moved against the direction of the ship's acceleration. Still, the Iron Psalm moved forward. Ahead of them, the Karvath Gate continued to grow. The corrupted ring of alien ships pulsed with stolen reactor light. Every trapped Concordance vessel tied into it became another nerve. Another bone. Another sacrifice. The Karvath were not just building a passage through the silent meridian. They were building a mouth. At Bastion 1, Admiral Mara Voss watched the gate brighten on the tactical board. Her officers had stopped pretending the timer mattered. The structure was completing faster than predicted. 21 minutes, the tactical chief said. A second later, another officer corrected him. 19. Then another. 17. Mara's eyes narrowed. "It's feeding on panic." Matriarch Saraline's image flickered on the side monitor. She looked shaken but controlled. Behind her, the Concordance Council chamber was in chaos. Some counselors were shouting for full retreat. Others demanded all remaining fleets attack the gate with advanced weapons. One Oryx commander insisted they could still overwhelm the Karvath with enough force. Mar did not even look at him. "If you fire linked weapons into that gate," she said, "you will finish building it for them." Saraline raised a hand, silencing the chamber. "What do you need?" Mar looked at her then. For the first time, Saraline did not hear a request in the human admiral's voice. She heard command. "Every Concordance ship still outside the meridian will cut all adaptive systems and hold position. Every ship inside the dark will shut down central networks immediately. No rescue attempts without human clearance. No open channels. No prayers over broadcast. No songs. No surrender messages." A Seraphine counselor recoiled. "You would silence the dying?" Mara's expression stayed cold. "I would stop the dying from becoming weapons." The chamber fell quiet. Then the Hollow King spoke through every open channel at once. "You silence them because you know they call for you." The voice shifted with every word. It became Saraline's child. Thalas's last whisper. Kale's sister. Mara's old captain. 1,000 dead faces wearing one hunger. "You call yourselves guardians," it said, "but you are jailers. You seal the frightened in darkness and name it mercy." Mara did not respond. The voice grew softer. "Humanity understands cages. You build them everywhere. Around worlds. Around ships. Around hearts. Around grief." Inside Bastion 1, several officers stiffened. One began shaking so violently that another took his station without a word. Mara stepped toward the main communication board. Broadcast static on all Concordance civilian bands. The signal officer stared at her. "That will drown out distress calls." "Yes, Admiral." Mara turned. The officer obeyed. Across the edge of the forbidden dark, human static spread like a storm. Harsh, ugly, meaningless noise flooded open channels. The Hollow King's voice fractured. For a few seconds, it sounded almost angry. Then it laughed. The sound passed through armor. On the Iron Psalm, the forward screen went dead. The old gunner at the optical site lifted his head. "Captain," he said, "visual contact." Rook turned. Through the cracked forward viewport, beyond the Karvath ships and the corrupted gate, something vast moved in the deepest dark. It was not fully through. Not yet. Only part of it pressed against the opening, like a face behind black glass. The human mind tried to make shape from it and failed. It looked like a crown made of dead stars. Then a hand made of broken ships. Then an eye large enough to drown a moon. Lieutenant Kale looked at it and began to cry without realizing. The voice of his sister whispered, "Don't look away." Rook stepped between him and the viewport. "Eyes on your station." Kale blinked hard. "Yes, sir." Rook opened a burst relay to Bastion 1. "Admiral, we have visual on the core." Mara's voice returned through static. "Can you destroy it?" Rook studied the tactical overlay. The gate's core was shielded behind layers of corrupted hulls and Karvath vessels. The Iron Psalm's main rail cannon could break it, but not from their current approach. The shot angle was wrong. He looked at the inner ring. Then he understood. "Not from here," Rook said. Mara was silent for 1 second. "What angle?" Rook's eyes stayed on the gate. "Inside the ring." At Bastion 1, the command room froze. Saraline heard the answer. Her face tightened. "Inside? That is suicide." Rook's voice came through calm and dry. "That depends how much of the ship you want back." Mara closed her eyes for half a breath. "Survival probability." Rook looked around his bridge. At the burned stations. At the old gunner. At Kale, young and terrified but still standing. Then he answered. "Primitive." No one smiled. But every human understood. Mara opened a direct channel to the Iron Psalm crew. "Captain Rook, your mission parameters are accepted. Strike the gate core. If possible, withdraw." Rook heard the words "if possible." So did everyone else. He opened shipwide comms. "This is Captain Rook. We are entering the enemy gate to fire on the core from inside the ring. Any crew member who wants evacuation has 90 seconds to reach escape pods. No shame. No record. No judgment. The bridge waited. No one moved. In the engine decks, wounded technicians kept sealing reactor lines. In the gun bays, crews loaded the spinal cannon by hand. In medical, doctors strapped patients into crash harnesses and kept working. On the bridge, Lieutenant Kale looked toward the escape corridor. His sister's voice whispered from the wall. "Run." Kale closed his eyes. Then he sat back down at navigation. Captain Rook watched him. "You sure?" Kale's voice shook. "No." Rook nodded. "Good. Only idiots are sure." The 90 seconds passed. Rook switched channels. "All hands, brace for gate entry." The Iron Psalm accelerated. Karveth ships turned toward it immediately. Black fire crawled across the dreadnought's armor. Plates split. Compartments vented. Human damage crews sealed what they could and abandoned what they could not. The ship did not dodge elegantly. It punched forward like a fist through glass. On Velora Station, the Concordance watched in silence as the ugly human dreadnought drove into the place no alien commander would have dared enter. Saraline whispered, almost to herself, "They know how to die." Mara heard her. "No," she said. "They know what is worth dying for." The Iron Psalm crossed into the ring. Every light on the bridge went red. The Hollow King focused fully on them. Its voice no longer pretended to be loved ones. Now it was ancient, vast, and cold. "Little iron thing," it said. "You cannot kill night." Captain Rook stared into the dark ahead. "No," he said. "But I can put a hole in your door." The spinal cannon began its final charge. The old gunner leaned into the optical sight, hands steady despite the ship shaking around him. "Manual alignment," he called. "Range unstable. Target visible. Adjusting by eye." Kale fought the navigation controls as gravity twisted around the ship. "Captain, engines are dragging. Something is pulling us into the core." "Use it," Rook said. Kale looked up. "What?" "If it wants us closer, let it help." Kale swallowed, then forced the Iron Psalm into the pull. The ship dropped through the inner ring like a stone falling into a well. The gate core filled the viewport. A black, pulsing knot of corrupted ships, stolen reactors, and living darkness. The gunner adjusted one brass dial. Then another. The Hollow King screamed inside every bone on the ship. "Open!" Rook gripped the command rail. "Fire!" The Iron Psalm fired. There was no beam. No golden lance. No elegant ring of light. Just one solid slug of dense human-forged metal, launched from a spinal rail cannon with enough force to turn physics into punishment. It tore through the center of the Karveth gate. For one impossible second, nothing happened. Then the core broke. The corrupted ring of Concordance ships twisted inward as if space itself had punched through it. Stolen reactors detonated out of sequence. Black filaments snapped across the structure like burning nerves. Karveth ships folded, cracked, and tore apart under the force of a weapon they had not learned fast enough to understand. The gate did not explode beautifully. It died ugly. And that was why it died. Across the forbidden dark, the Hollow King screamed. The scream was not sound. It was pressure. Meaning. Rage. A command too large for living minds to hold. It passed through ships, armor, bone, and memory. Human crews dropped to their knees. Alien survivors clawed at their helmets. Lights burst. Consoles shattered. Blood ran from noses, ears, and eyes. 9 human ships died in the first wave of that scream, but the gate was broken. At Bastion 1, Admiral Mara Voss gripped the command rail as the entire fortress shook. Around her, officers forced themselves back to their stations. One man was bleeding from both ears and still reading coordinates from a paperboard. Another had lost his voice and was writing orders by hand. Mara looked at the tactical display. The Karveth formation had fractured. For the first time since the war began, they were not advancing. They were reacting. Mara saw the opening and took it. "All bastions," she said, voice hard, "execute lockfall." Across the silent meridian, humanity's hidden fortresses revealed themselves completely. The black bastions opened fire. Weapons platforms disguised as frozen moons split apart. Dead mining stations unfolded into kinetic batteries. Ancient satellites, written off as orbital junk, awakened and began broadcasting brutal waves of signal-killing noise. Minefields seeded centuries earlier activated in cascading lines, not guided by smart systems, not linked by clean networks, but triggered by mechanical clocks, radiation thresholds, and physical contact. The forbidden dark became a furnace of crude human preparation. Rail slugs crossed mine blasts. Nuclear charges tore open dead zones. Gravity anchors locked into place. Signal disruptors screamed across every open frequency until even the Hollow King's voice began to fracture. The Karveth tried to adapt. There was too much chaos. No single system controlled the attack. No perfect rhythm guided it. No central intelligence connected the weapons. Every mine was stupid in its own way. Every missile followed an old path. Every railgun fired by local command. Every human ship fought like a wounded animal with teeth still buried in the enemy's throat. The Concordance had spent centuries perfecting war. Humanity had spent centuries preparing for the day perfection would fail. On Velora Station, the Council watched without speaking. High Marshal Varen Sil, who had once mocked human bullets, stared at the burning tactical feed as Karveth ships were shredded by metal, fire, and timing. "This is not advanced warfare," he whispered. Matriarch Saraline did not look away. "No," she said. "It is survival." Inside the forbidden dark, the Iron Psalm was dying. The shot had broken the gate, but the cost was already written across the ship. The spinal cannon was fused. The forward armor was gone. Decks 7 through 20 were open to vacuum. The engines were unstable. The reactor shielding was cracked. Captain Elias Rook stood on a bridge filled with smoke and red light. "Damage report," he said. No one answered immediately. Then Lieutenant Cale Mercer coughed blood onto his sleeve and looked at the dead navigation board. Main engines failing. Port thrusters gone. Starboard control delayed. Reactor containment at 40% and falling. Rook nodded once. "Can we clear the blast zone?" Cale looked at the numbers. Then he looked at his captain. "No, sir." The bridge became quiet. Outside, the remaining Karveth ships were trying to reform around the broken gate fragments. They were wounded, confused, but not dead. Several were already extending black filaments toward the shattered core, trying to rebuild a smaller opening. Rook saw it. So did Cale. So did Mara Voss on Bastion 1. Rook opened a direct burst channel. "Admiral." Mara's voice returned through static. "I see it. We're too deep to withdraw." "I know. We can overload the reactor inside the remaining cluster." A pause followed. Not long. Long enough to hurt. Mara asked, "How many still aboard?" Rook looked at the crew status board. Half of it was dark. "Too many." Mara's voice lowered. "Elias." That was the first time most officers in Bastion 1 had ever heard Admiral Voss use his first name. Rook looked toward the cracked viewport, where the Hollow King's broken doorway still pulsed. "Tell Earth the old coffin did its job." Mara closed her eyes for half a second. Then she opened them. "I will." The channel ended. Rook turned to his bridge. "Launch every pod that still works." Cale looked up sharply. "Captain, navigation can still." "Launch them." Escape pods fired from the dying dreadnought in uneven bursts. Some made it clear. Some did not. Karveth fire consumed several before human escort ships could cover them. Still, dozens escaped. Then hundreds. Not enough. Never enough. Cale remained at navigation. Rook saw him. "You had a pod assignment." Cale's face was pale, streaked with blood and sweat. "It left." "Did it?" Cale looked back at the dead board. "Yes, sir." Rook studied him for one moment, then nodded. "Bad luck." Cale gave a weak smile. "Primitive luck." The Hollow King spoke again. "Weaker now. Angrier. You will die unseen." Captain Rook looked at the tactical feed. Human ships were watching. Alien fleets were watching. The Concordance Council was watching. For 400 years, the galaxy had looked at human warships and seen ugly metal. crude design, primitive thinking. Now they saw what those ships were truly built for. Rook answered the darkness. No. They are watching. Then he gave the final order. Reactor overload. Full burn into the cluster. The iron SAM moved. Not fast. Not cleanly. It dragged itself forward with broken engines and dying thrusters, armor peeling away, compartments venting fire and atmosphere. Karveth ships turned toward it, firing everything they had left. The dreadnought shook under the assault. Still, it came on. At Bastion 1, Mara stood perfectly still. On Velora Station, Caroline rose from her seat. Across the galaxy, every open military channel carried the image of the human ship driving itself into the enemy's heart. The Hollow King's voice became a roar. You cannot hold me forever. Rook sat back in his command chair. No, he said quietly. But we can make you pay rent. Kale almost laughed. Then the iron SAM reached the center of the remaining Karveth cluster. Its reactor overloaded. The explosion was white, violent, uneven, and final. It tore through the shattered gate fragments and ripped the Karveth formation apart from the inside. Black ships cracked open like burned shells. Corrupted concordance hulls disintegrated. The unstable doorway collapsed inward, dragging the Hollow King's reaching presence back into the deeper dark. The scream that followed shook every ship at the meridian. Then the voice faded. Not gone. Contained. Mara gave the final command. Close the meridian. The black bastions fired their seal charges. Gravity anchors locked. Radiation curtains ignited. Signal dead zones expanded across the boundary. Ancient minds shifted into their final pattern. Space itself seemed to tighten as humanity's brutal wall stitched the forbidden dark shut again. The Hollow King's voice returned one last time, thin and distant. This is not victory. Admiral Mara Voss stared into the black region on the display. No, she said. It is containment. Then the silent meridian closed. Phase 8, when the galaxy learned. The war did not end that day. Wars that large never end cleanly. Karveth remnants still haunted broken systems. Refugee worlds still burned. Entire colonies had been erased so completely that only broken navigation records proved they had ever existed. The Concordance counted its dead in numbers too large for language, while survivors drifted through evacuation lanes in ships that smelled of smoke, medicine, fear, and silence. But the galaxy survived. Not because its greatest empires had been wise. Not because its most advanced weapons had been enough. Not because its leaders had listened when listening still mattered. The galaxy survived because humanity had built walls no one respected. Because primitive ships had entered a place perfect fleets could not endure. Because ugly weapons had done what beautiful machines could not. Because one human dreadnought, mocked for being an iron coffin with engines, had carried thousands of souls into the mouth of the dark and slammed it shut with fire. 3 weeks after the silent meridian closed, Admiral Mara Voss returned to Velora Station. This time, no one laughed. No counselor whispered behind polished hands. No alien marshal smirked at her uniform. No diplomat looked away as if the human presence were an interruption between more important matters. The central dais had been left empty. For her. Mara saw it the moment she entered the chamber. The highest platform in the Galactic Concordance, the place reserved for those whose voices shaped civilizations. 400 years ago, humanity had been placed near the lower ring. Allowed to speak. Rarely answered. Now the galaxy wanted her above them. Mara did not take the dais. She walked to the same lower position where humans had always stood. That made the silence heavier. Matriarch Caroline rose slowly from her seat. She looked different now. Still elegant. Still controlled. Still carrying the dignity of a leader born into centuries of power. But something inside her pride had cracked, and through that crack came something the Concordance Chamber had rarely heard. Honesty. Admiral Voss, Caroline said, the Concordance owes humanity more than gratitude. Mara said nothing. Caroline continued. We called your species primitive because your ships were crude. We called your weapons barbaric because they lacked elegance. We called your warnings superstition because we mistook memory for fear. The chamber remained still. Saraline lowered her head. We were wrong. No one moved. Then, one by one, the representatives of the Galactic Concordance stood. Vile, Oryx, Seraphine, Illyrian survivors, border delegates, military commanders, civilian governors. Species that had once treated humanity as useful noise now stood in silence before a human admiral in a plain black uniform. Mara watched them without softness. Respect, she said, would have been useful before 31,000 ships crossed the meridian. The words cut through ceremony like a blade. Saraline accepted them. Yes. Mara looked across the chamber. Then understand this clearly. Humanity will no longer request permission to guard the silent meridian. We will command all operations related to the Forbidden Dark. No fleet crosses that boundary. No probe. No research vessel. No rescue mission. No priest. No king. No council vote. A vile counselor opened his mouth, then closed it. Mara's voice became colder. You wanted proof. You have graves. No one challenged her. Not because they liked the order. Because they finally understood why it existed. From that day forward, the maps changed. The Forbidden Dark was no longer marked as unexplored space. It was no longer treated as a blank region waiting for brave ships and clever machines. Every official concordance chart now carried the same human symbol. A black circle crossed by a red line. Beneath it were 3 words written in every major galactic language. Do not enter. Human ships patrolled the silent meridian openly now. The Black Bastions no longer hid behind dead moons and mining camouflage. Their weapons remained ugly. Their hulls remained scarred. Their crews still trained under blackout conditions, still practiced manual targeting, still learned how to fight when every system failed and every ghost in the dark spoke with a familiar voice. But now, when concordance fleets passed near the meridian, they lowered their banners. Alien captains gave human stations distance. Alien admirals waited for human clearance. And across thousands of worlds, children began learning a different story about Earth. Not the story of a loud young species clawing its way into civilization. Not the story of crude soldiers and iron ships. The new story was quieter. Older. Darker. It was the story of the species that stood guard while the galaxy slept. 1 year after the battle, Matriarch Saraline visited the memorial of the HSS Iron Sam. It floated near the silent meridian, built from recovered armor plates, twisted railgun fragments, and blackened hull pieces pulled from the edge of the dead zone. There was no golden statue. No elegant sculpture. No glowing monument pretending death had been beautiful. Just dark human metal. Names. And one sentence carved beneath them. When the dark opened, they held. Saraline stood before the names for a long time. Admiral Mara Voss joined her without announcement. Neither spoke at first. Beyond the memorial, the Forbidden Dark waited. Silent. Sealed. Not defeated. Not gone. The Hollow King still existed somewhere beyond the boundary, patient as death, old as hunger, buried behind the brutal wall humanity had built across the stars. Finally, Saraline said, I once thought humans built ugly things. Mara looked at the memorial. We do. Saraline almost smiled. Now I understand why. Mara's eyes stayed on the names of the dead. Pretty things do not always hold. For a long moment, they stood together in the shadow of the meridian. A year earlier, Saraline would have looked into that darkness and seen empty space. A superstition. A primitive warning from a fearful species. Now she saw the truth. The dark had not spared them. Humanity had. And if it ever opened again, the galaxy would not ask whether humans were advanced enough to lead. It would step aside. Because the next time the war reached the Forbidden Dark, no one would call humanity primitive. They would call them first.